Hello everyone, I'm Brian. Today I'm going to be reacting to Escaping the Forest of Samsara, Role of Guru. So, the picture does not quite look like a philosophy or a way of life picture. It looks like you're trying to escape from the forest because of wolves. But anyways, let's go ahead and get started. CC's on. Okay. And before we actually get started, sorry. So samsara is basically it's pain and suffering in life. Samsara. If I vaguely remember correctly. Suffering of life. Suffering.
Imagine you were hopelessly lost in a huge forest, being stung by insects and threatened by wild animals, while you tried to find food, water, and shelter from the pouring rain. Being lost in a forest like this is an illustration used by the rishis, the sages of ancient India, to portray the struggle and suffering of worldly life. They called that life of misery samsara. Samsara literally means that which goes on and on. It describes a life filled with troubles, small and large, that continue each and every day, and then the next life, and the next, and so on. Having been born into this dismal situation, we all seek relief. We seek freedom from suffering. And with enough effort, we can minimize our suffering and enjoy a degree of happiness. But ultimately, we still remain trapped in a vicious cycle of birth, suffering, and rebirth, a cycle that seems to have no end. We are lost, so to speak, in the forest of samsara.
So I was close. Rebirth, suffering, death,
In
rebirth,
this
suffering.
forest of samsara, angry bosses, aggressive drivers, and hurtful relatives are like annoying insects who sting you with their words and deeds. Threatening situations like losing a job or being diagnosed with a serious illness are like wild animals roaming in a forest. You can't always spot the wild animals, but you know they're lurking nearby. Likewise, in the forest of samsara, you can't always anticipate threatening situations, but you know they're not far off. And there seems to be no way to escape all this. It's like being trapped by a dense tangle of trees that obstruct your every step and keep you from finding a way out. That dense tangle of trees represents the tremendous complexity of life. It traps us by leading us to become so absorbed in mundane things like shopping, emails, and television that we seem to have no time or inclination to seek a better kind of life.
That is so strange considering that you think of technology as a way of making life easier, yet it's just a different kind of distraction.
We come to accept this life of samsara as inevitable, inescapable. We become resigned to a life of struggle and suffering. There's a great story about frogs in a pot of water that's being heated on a stove.
Slowly?
As the water gradually warms up, the cold-blooded frogs simply adjust to the higher temperature, and they don't bother to jump out of the pot. The water soon comes to a boil, and the frogs perish. This story illustrates how many people simply adjust to the misery of life, making no effort at all to change anything, and then they perish.
Perhaps that's me. I mean, I've come to accustom to life, but I understand suffering, so perhaps that is a bit of me in there, for sure.
But there are always a few frogs smart enough to jump out of the pot before it's too late.
I'm like hanging on the pot.
In the same way, there are always a few people who are able to perceive the insidious trap of worldly life. Rather than resigning themselves to unrelenting struggle and suffering, they seek to escape from the forest of samsara. One who strives for this kind of liberation is called a mumukshu. In the forest of samsara, there are many paths going in many different directions. But which one leads out of the forest? Which path can lead you to escape the vicious cycle of birth, suffering, and rebirth? Which path leads to perfect peace and contentment?
Interesting, actually. I guess some people, and at least in maybe the Western world, will think that path of, paying for comforts and paying other people to do things for you, like say your laundry or your yard work, then buying luxurious things as a way of peace and contentment, but it's a false path. It's just the fact that there are many paths to escape samsara, but there are also potentially many paths to lead to a false samsara, false escape to samsara, sorry. The only reason why I say many paths, is because of Lakhani, when he talks about there is no one correct path. I do believe that. Everyone's a little bit different. There are many right paths, but at the same time, there are many false paths.
Many paths in life can lead you to find some happiness, like a new job, a new home, getting married, or starting a family. But each of these paths also bring new problems. Your new job might be too demanding. Your new neighbors might be obnoxious. And your new spouse, well, let's not talk about that. Really speaking, paths like these merely lead to different areas inside the forest of samsara. None of them lead beyond its boundaries. None of them leads to perfect peace and contentment. And to make matters worse, none of the paths are marked with signposts that indicate where they eventually go. When you start a new job or get married, you don't really know how everything will turn out in the long run. Every decision in life is shrouded in uncertainty. No path comes with a guarantee of happiness. Then, what should you do? Well, it would be helpful to find someone who can properly guide you, someone who can point you to the path that actually leads out of the forest of samsara. Obviously, such a guide is a guru, a skillful spiritual teacher who not only knows the way out of the forest, but is also prepared to show you the way. A guru's role is first to help you understand that none of the countless paths in life you have explored or considered can ever lead to perfect peace and contentment. Then the guru shows you a completely different kind of path, a path that turns your attention within and engages you in a practice of self-inquiry. With the guru's guidance, that inner path can ultimately lead you to discover the true source of contentment, peace, and joy within yourself. You can discover your true divine nature, innately full and complete.
When he talks about contentment there, I've said that many times before, I'm relatively content in life, and I would never say that I'm blissful. And that is just something that I hear other Sadhguru in Swami Sarvapriyananda says is bliss. I guess it's just the definition is maybe I'm struggling with. And bliss, in my opinion, is very joyful. Whereas content is something that you're not joyful nor you're sad. You're neither, because joy and sadness are emotions. Content is nothing in some sense. So that's kind of the issue I had in the past about the definition of being in bliss, especially whenever you finally are aware. And so far, I don't think they've changed their saying about it in terms of bliss. I know some people have made some comments, but it's been a long time, so I can't quite remember. But just throwing it out there, and I genuinely do believe this bliss, perhaps the definition is content, because your true self is unaffected by emotions. That means joyfulness or sadness are unaffected by you. The true you is always in content, neither joyful nor sadness.
They say, when the student is ready, the guru will appear. But while you're waiting, you might meet someone who looks and acts like a guru, but is not. As you know, there are many false gurus who aren't genuinely interested in helping you escape from the forest of samsara. Instead, they're likely to guide you down a path that leads to enhancing their egos and their bank accounts. But there are others who look like gurus who are indeed sincere about wanting to help you. Yet, they themselves might not know the way out of the forest of samsara. The guidance they give will be incomplete at best.
And I will say this too, the fact that this is why I talk, I listen, and I think about a lot of things, because I get a lot of information and I talk to people in a way of not really guidance, but just merely to make people think. That alone, in my opinion, is great, is good. To not have a firm, or not to have necessarily a firm path, but to either change, make you think about your path, and then by thinking about it, either you change it or by reaffirming your path. Thinking doesn't mean change, but it can. Again, thinking to say, you know what, my path is correct. And then now you have a stronger, firmer foundation for your path. Or you're like, maybe this isn't the right path for me. Let me change. Again, not telling you to change or to continue, merely to think. But perhaps not thinking in some sense is meditation. Well, obviously, you don't want any thoughts or noise in your mind when you meditate to think inwardly, or sorry, not think, to look inwardly on your true self.
While traveling in India, I was often given directions by well-intentioned people who really didn't know where my destination was. They gave me directions anyway, with all earnestness, because they didn't want to disappoint me. So, if you receive guidance from someone who looks like a guru, how do you know if his directions are correct or not? The only sure way to find out is to follow his guidance and see if it leads you out of the forest of samsara. Unfortunately, you might spend months or even years going in circles. To avoid this kind of trial and error process, it would be best to identify a guru who is truly competent and capable.
How would you do that?
A famous passage in the Mundaka Upanishad describes the necessary qualifications of a true guru with these words: Sagurum eva abhigachet samitpanihi shrotriyam brahmanishtam. A proper student should seek out a guru who is a shrotriya, well versed in the scriptures, and a Brahmanishta, firmly established in truth. These two terms are very important and must be clearly understood. First, Shrotriya. The scriptures are like a map that shows you the route by which you can escape from the forest of samsara. A guru should not only possess that scriptural map, but should also be able to interpret it correctly. That map happens to be in Sanskrit language, and it's filled with subtle, mystifying teachings. Without proper training, it can't be correctly understood. In addition to being a Shrotriya, a guru should also be a Brahmanishta, firmly established in the truth you seek to know. That means the guru should have already used the scriptural map to cross the boundary of the forest of samsara and reach the very destination that you wish to reach. That destination is the personal discovery of the divinity within, the recognition of one's own true nature as being unborn, unchanging, vast, limitless.
With that, is Swami Sarvapriyananda... I've asked this before, and I'll ask again though. Is Swami Sarvapriyananda considered to be enlightened? Someone said he wasn't, or he doesn't consider, or maybe Swami has said that he doesn't consider himself enlightened. So, would he not be considered a guru then? Perhaps he is still a teacher of some type, or I don't want to say teacher, maybe I don't know how else would you describe it. I won't say a guru, because if the definition is there that they must have recognized one's own true nature, then they are considered a guru. But if, I'm assuming that means you're enlightened, perhaps, or maybe there is a different qualification for that. Is it that you can recognize one's true nature, but yet not be enlightened? Is that the case? Because I don't know if you can be... if you can recognize one's true nature, your true self, and still not be enlightened, or if you do recognize your true self, then you must be enlightened. I don't know where that lies. So, so first, that's the first question. Then the second question is Swami Sarvapriyananda, Sarvapriyananda, is he a guru? And does he consider himself enlightened? So I'm asking that again, just in case something has changed. And if he's not a guru, is he fit to teach? Again, that doesn't necessarily just apply to him. That applies to everyone who is perhaps teaching this and not enlightened. If those two are different, meaning that you can know one's true you can know your true nature but not be enlightened. If that's the case, then well, then it would work. I'm sorry, but if you have to know your true nature, then therefore you're enlightened. Therefore you should be able to teach. But if you know your nature but you're unenlightened, then are you qualified to teach? I'm guessing that's the... I hope that makes sense.
This passage from the Mundaka Upanishad also mentions the qualifications of a proper student. In college, certain prerequisites must be fulfilled before taking a particular course. In a similar way, there are certain prerequisites that you must possess in order to successfully escape the forest of samsara. The Upanishad indicates these prerequisites with an arcane expression, samit pani, which means the student must bring sacrificial twigs to the guru. Without going into the details, this phrase implies that you must have enough shraddha, or trust, in the guru's guidance to follow it for a sufficient length of time to reach the edge of the forest of samsara. The journey is often long, so you have to be patient and deeply committed. You also have to be ready or prepared in the sense of being psychologically mature, emotionally mature, and spiritually mature. Metaphorically, you have to be ready to keep up with the Guru during the long journey without falling behind.
But how long is too long? You know, like you were saying earlier about how, you know, you could end up following this guru, guru, in circles for so long, and especially if you don't know if it's a genuine guru or not, because people who can read Sanskrit, excuse me, people who can read Sanskrit doesn't necessarily mean they follow Hinduism or a Advaita Vedanta. So, you know, I guess that is kind of a very difficult question to answer because you genuinely don't know. Everyone's different, everyone follows a different path, and each path may take a little bit longer than others.
Now, suppose you are a qualified student, and with the help of a qualified guru, you manage to find your way out from the forest of samsara. Your struggle to gain happiness and avoid suffering finally comes to an end. No doubt, you'd feel a great sense of relief, and you'd probably feel very grateful for your guru's guidance. Then, having reached your destination, you could bid farewell to your guru and return to your usual day-to-day activities. But before long, you might find yourself absorbed in all the mundane details of life once again.
Get lost in the forest.
You might
again.
get drawn back into the insidious trap that prevents you from appreciating the true source of peace and contentment within by immersing you in the complexities of daily life. You could find yourself helplessly lost in the forest of samsara all over again. Let's try to understand this problem. Suppose a person who's been lost in a forest reaches home with the help of a capable guide. The following day, he might wander away from home while taking a stroll and find himself lost in the forest once again. Without the guide, he might not recognize the path he took to get home yesterday. He still needs guidance, at least until he learns to find the correct route home on his own. In the same way, you'll probably need a guru's ongoing guidance until you learn to independently navigate your way through the forest of samsara. Gaining this kind of independence and self-sufficiency is the goal of Advaita Vedanta's three main practices. Those practices, as you may already know, are Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana.
Sorry, before it goes on, I've heard those terms before a while back, but I've not seen them crop up lately. So I'm clearly not, well, perhaps because I've not delved into specifically Advaita Vedanta. I need to take a picture of that and 1618.
Shravana is the use of Vedantic scriptures, as taught by a guru, to guide your process of inquiry, a process that leads you within to discover your true divine nature. Manana is the process by which a guru removes any doubts and confusion that might arise during your process of inquiry. Finally, Nididhyasana is a special kind of contemplation practice that helps you fully assimilate the spiritual knowledge you have already gained. A guru engages you in all three of these practices to free you from being dependent on his or her guidance. How does this work? Through Shravana, a guru teaches you to interpret and use the scriptural map for yourself, using English translations if you can't read the original Sanskrit texts. With this skill, you can rely directly on those scriptures to lead you out of the forest of samsara, should you ever find yourself lost again. While studying the scriptural map, you'll probably have many questions and doubts. Maps in general tend to be complicated, and in some ways, the Vedantic scriptures can also be complex. Through manana, a guru addresses and dismisses any confusion you might have about the content of those scriptures. To understand the purpose of nididhyasana, suppose someone who was once lost in a forest not only learns the way home, but travels that same path again and again. Repeating this journey many times makes the route intimately familiar. Every bend and turn in the path gets burned into his brain cells, so to speak. More than that, the path also becomes well-worn. A rut gets formed in the ground, making the trail distinct and easy to recognize. This repeated journey represents a practice of nididhyasana, contemplation. In nididhyasana, you immerse yourself in the teachings of Vedanta again and again, dwelling upon the truth of your own nature, reflecting on it repeatedly until you become firmly established in that truth. After enough nididhyasana, you will be so mindful of the true source of contentment and peace within that you will never again get lost in the forest of samsara, no matter how complex and demanding your life might be. Returning home to your true self becomes effortless, spontaneous, instinctive. You remain free, forever liberated from the struggle and suffering of samsara.
I was going to say a little bit earlier that that's probably the reason why Raja Yoga is very important. I guess, again, from my understanding of it, karma is your action, thoughts, jnana is knowledge, bhakti is devotion, and raja meditation. To meditate every day is a way to, in a sense, go back to home. And then karma, how do I say? I never really thought about the other three, but in terms of Raja Yoga itself, to meditate, in a sense to kind of come back home. Because if you don't meditate and you're constantly putting yourself into everyday life without any way of coming back home, you kind of get lost further and further into the woods. By meditating, I assume that that's one way of coming back home. So as you go out in life, you meditate to return home. Then when you're done meditating, you're in a sense going back out to the wilderness. Then meditating, you're working your way back home. Now, if you don't meditate properly or you can't concentrate, you are not truly returning all the way back home, but you are making your way back, but may have gotten lost. And that was my assumption or thoughts at the time. And I figured maybe meditation was the way to return home, because it's a way to kind of clear your mind of everyday life, of your emotions, of your thoughts, of your actions. Meditation to clear everything, to be, in a sense, not one with yourself, but to realize your true self again. But yeah, that was my thoughts at the time. I didn't want to really pause them at that time. And I'm trying to get better at pausing. I want to pause, quick information, and continue playing. See if there's anything left. There's 33 seconds left. Probably not. Okay, it's probably does it. Yeah, okay. Okay. Anyways, that's my reaction to Escaping the Forest of Samsara, a role of guru. If you like my content, please consider subscribing, thumbs up, thumbs down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next vid.